Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am here with you today on a very special matter. I'm going to be speaking with a candidate for the New York 22nd Congressional District. This is for the race for 2022, the midterm elections. This is a critical election for Democrats and Republicans throughout the nation. But the person I'm going to be speaking with today is not a Republican, not a Democrat. This is something special. Now, we've given this opportunity previously to the Democratic candidate who has announced. We are now going to go to an independent and speak with them. And that is, as you can see on the screen, is Mr. Hal Stewart. No, it is not Green Lantern. No, this is not a DC revival movie. We are talking about Mr. Hal Stewart, a United States Navy veteran and a concerned citizen living in Binghamton, New York, in Broome County of New York, who is running for the first time for the New York 22nd District, which is something near and dear to my heart, having run for this district myself. And without further ado, let me take the moment to introduce Hal Stewart. How are you, Hal?
Michael, I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. One of the key things that we do on this channel is we want to make sure that every candidate of any race always has an opportunity to reach the public and to let them know what's going on. Many in the major media don't do this, and we want you to have the chance to have your voice heard clearly and in full context. And we will always stand by that. So Hal, before I say anything else, let me start off with a very simple, and I'm sure it's a question you're going to hear a lot if you haven't heard it already, and that is why you've never been in elected office before. You've never run for an elected office before. Why are you making this first-time venture into politics, and why for the New York 22nd District?
Yeah, so you're right. I get that question a lot. And the reason for me is, quite honestly, I imagine most people give some thought to running for office. Maybe it's just a passing thought. And that's kind of how I was. I always thought, well, what could I do? And so on. But then I'm like, I'm not doing it. That's not me. I'm not interested in that. But this past election cycle, and really the last few years, this hyper partisanship that we're seeing is gotten over the top. And quite frankly, when I talk to my friends, when I talk to coworkers, everybody I know is overwhelmingly down the middle. They don't view things as everything Democrats do is bad, everything Republicans do is bad, and vice versa, or is good. They just want solutions. They want answers. And we see, it is just so, right now, we've had Claudia Tenney, we've had Anthony Brindisi, and both of them, while their intentions may have been good, they got to Congress and they were mouthpieces for their party. And quite frankly, the 22nd District took a back seat to what the Republicans or the Democrats needed. And I thought I could come in and I could show, look, that we're not while we do typically vote Republican in our district, we're not really a Republican district. We're not a Democratic district. We are just a district that wants answers. We're hardworking people. We just want what's done right. We want to try to keep as much money in our pocket, and that's what I want to try to do. I want to help people out and help the country out.
Okay, so let me clarify something or go into greater detail with one of the first questions. Obviously, as I mentioned, you are a United States Navy veteran. Are you a native to the southern tier of New York, the New York 22nd District, or did you come here after your military service?
After my military service. I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. And I lived there all my life. And I left right after high school. I graduated that weekend. I had my graduation party. Maybe it was the following weekend. And then right from my party, I was off to a hotel waiting to catch a plane to Great Lakes, Illinois. When I came back, I went back to Syracuse and I was there for a little while till I moved down here in Binghamton, which was 2001. And I've been here ever since. And this is now home. This is where I'm going to live out my days.
Okay. So you've been in the community for 20 years.
Correct.
And that's not a bad thing because as someone who myself ran for the New York 22nd District back in 2014, after having been in the community for about 10 years at that point, I understand you can be concerned with your community and don't have to be a lifelong resident. Many people misunderstand that. And so I want to clarify, that's not a requirement by law or even by community.
No, I think you can, I think you can come into a community and on day one, care about it. I mean, I don't think it takes any, there's no time frame before you start caring about your neighbor.
Exactly. And I think that's important to state, because that is a misconception in modern politics. And I think we've all seen that happen before.
Sure.
So I want to clarify that. Now, I have a few questions. And let's start with something full disclosure for the public. I want you to know that I've been in communication with you, Hal, now for about 6 months, maybe a year on Twitter. You have a Twitter account which indicated, going back as somewhere between 6 months and a year, that you had an indication, a drive towards running for the New York 22nd District. And now you have realized that you have filed with the FEC the initial paperwork that you are seeking this race. I do not see at this moment, and it's still early in the process, so I don't see any funds that have been there. Usually it takes at least $5,000 being committed to that for a person, besides their stated commitment with the FEC that you're running. You would also have the $5,000, and then that's followed up with getting signatures. Have you made that initial fundraising statement yet?
No, it's quite like the fundraising isn't actually a requirement. Actually, filing with the FEC isn't even a requirement. That's something that you do. It's mandatory once you hit the $5,000. Yes. However, part of my campaign, though, is I'm not accepting donations, large or small, whether it's from from the NRA or from my neighbor next door. I'm not taking any donations. So whether or not I hit that $5,000, that's going to be close. I have a belief that I can win on ideas, that I don't have to spend millions of dollars. Now, I'm also not ignorant to that, puts me way behind the 8 ball. But it's not likely that I'm going to hit $5,000.
Okay, that's fine. That isn't the beginning or end. That has nothing to do with a candidate or what they're doing, but it is a question people will ask, and I wanted to make sure we did ask that. Now, one of the things I've seen in many of the conversations we've had, and what I've seen in some of your press releases, is stating that you have a very strong opinion of Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, who is the current Congresswoman, and you may as well have had a very strong statement about Anthony Brindisi when he was the incumbent. So I think it's a position about the incumbent. I want to ask first, is there something about what Claudia Tenney is doing that you disagree with and that you think you can improve on? The second question is about redistricting. So let me let you answer that first question.
So and to be clear, I don't know Representative Tenney, and on a personal level, and so this isn't about her. I'm sure, by all accounts, she's a wonderful mother. Looks like she raised a great kid. But I don't know her that way. I don't know her as a daughter or a neighbor or friend. So, at the end of the day, those are the things that really matter about somebody. So this isn't about her personally. My problem with her, and the same problem I had with Anthony Brindisi. Brindisi said he was going to go and he was going to be an independent. He wasn't going to just follow the party line. What did he do when he got there? Followed the party line step by step. He said he wasn't going to impeach Trump the first time. What did he do? Impeach Trump. Claudia Tenney is exactly the same way. I'll give you a good example. When we reached 200,000 deaths with COVID, and it was reported, she tweeted out that it was a Democratic talking point, these 200,000 deaths. Now that she wants to weaponize that number, the 500,000, against Governor Cuomo, and this isn't a defense of him, it's just, she's now saying that all these people are dead because of him. So here in one case, she's saying it's not real. It's a Democratic talking point. And now she's saying, yes, very much they're real. And that's not just a number. Those are actual human beings that have lost their lives that she's just using, and she's doing it to push the agenda of the Republican Party and not, for the good of New York 22. So that's the issue that I have with her, is that she is 100% party line down the middle, no question about it.
Well, I do want to mention, as just again, for full disclosure for everyone watching, I do know Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, and I've known her for about 9, almost 10 years now. I do also know Anthony Brindisi, both when he was in the Assembly and also in Congress, also for about 10 years. So I do have a slightly different relationship and different understanding of both of them. So I do want to be clear about that. That has nothing to do with what we're speaking about, but I believe in giving people full disclosure. So you have a question about Claudia Tenney's position on COVID and the COVID process, which has been politicized by the right and the left for over a year now, for many reasons. Let me ask you, if, as is a question right now, and as this channel has very directly stated for the last 4 or 5 years now, we've been stating the New York 22nd District will be redistricted. And we believe that it will be a 3-way split, which would mean that the North would retain the New York 22nd District title. The Southern tier will be split in half. And we believe that this portion, Binghamton, Broome County, most of it, will be going into the New York 19th, which is held currently by Anthony Delgado, who is a Democrat. Let me ask you, if you are not running against Claudia Tenney or any candidate for the New York 22nd District, would you still run in the New York 19th District against Anthony Delgado, if that's how it turns out?
100%, yes. In fact, I share a similar sentiment that you do about how we'll be redistricted. I don't think I'll run against Claudia Tenney. If I had to put a wager down, I would guess I'm going to run against Representative Delgado, and 100%, he is no different. He is the same. He is a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party, and yeah, I don't see that is my issue, is that we aren't putting the people first. I mean, how often do you see these representatives go on cable news to repeat the same exact lines you've heard every other Republican or Democratic representative say? They're not doing anything for the district. They're just doing something for their party. And once, nowhere in the Constitution will you find Republican Party or will you find Democratic Party. It's all we the people. And so, yeah, no matter how the district shapes up, I'll be running.
Okay. And it's something that a lot of people haven't been talking about and haven't been addressing. It is something that this channel has been very aware of and speaking about for many years. And we agree with you, as we stated. We think it's going to be a 3-way split, with most of the lower Broome County, lower portion of Shenango County being added to the New York 19th.
You have to believe that the Democratic Party is licking their chops at the prospect of merging Tenney with Stefanik.
They're going to take off piece of the New York 21st, which is at least Stefanik's.
Yeah, they're licking their chops at the prospect of being able. When New York lost a representative, I think most people across the nation thought, because we're a blue state, oh great, the Democrats are going to lose one. No, quite the opposite. This is I'm sure somewhere Nancy Pelosi was smiling when she saw that.
Yeah, it's a lot more involved than a lot of people think. That it's not as simple as when one district just goes away and everything's fine. It's no, everybody gets changed.
That's right.
In this process, even though they used a lot of tricks like counting illegal aliens, which is a fact that was done by decree, executive order by Joe Biden on January 21st. So it's why the numbers are the way they are. That being said, though, let me ask you, so what is it specifically that is making you run? You've been here in 20 years. You've seen Maurice Hinchey, who formerly was of the New York 22nd District, which then went to Richard Hanna, which then went to Claudia Tenney, which then went to Anthony Brindisi, and back to Claudia Tenney now. So in that time frame, you've seen Democrats and Republicans hold the seat. You've seen a lot of the world change in terms of the leadership. What made you decide now is the time? Is there an issue or a specific reason why now is the time you're saying, I'm going to put myself and my family through the election process, which is not pleasant, I know for a fact?
Yeah, the big thing for me is, I mean, take a look right now at infrastructure. We are robbing Peter to pay Paul to come up with money to repair bridges, roads, to take care of things so people don't drive. I mean, look at what happened in Minneapolis, 2005-ish, where the bridge just collapsed while people were on it. We're playing a dangerous game, but the problem is year after year after year, we have these balloon deficits that just cause our debt to go skyrocketing. So when it comes time to pay for something, there's no money unless we print more or we start to peel it from different places. And that all comes from nobody actually having a solution, nobody being willing to step up and do the tough thing, which is to say, hey, look, we're going to have to cut this program in order to have some sort of future for this country. Look, I would love to be able to build a much better wall down at the southern border or make state universities free for the public. The problem is we don't have the money. I mean, heck, personally, I would love to go to the Bahamas next week. But if I spend the money on that, then there's not going to be money for the essentials, for the basics, for the bills. And so when we get so focused, when the people in Congress and the House and the Senate, they get so focused on trying to be a celebrity, trying to protect their party and push the party line, they lose focus of what is actually important. So yeah, that's why I decided now, like I said earlier, and for me, the biggest issue is the debt and the deficit, because that the long-term effects of just this out of control spending are catastrophic. I mean, I don't know what the limit is. We thought we would have been there by now as far as how much debt we could have. Clearly, being a superpower has its advantages. We thought we'd be Greece at this point, but there is a limit to the spending. There is a limit until there's a point where we can't provide. I mean, you want to talk about defund the police? If we can't pay our bills, it's not even going to be up to us.
Well, that's a very real and serious point. And I do want to address that with you, because right now there is the national deficit is national debt, is $28.4 trillion. Estimates range from the CBO, from congressional Democrats, and just the trend line of spending that we have right now, which some people can look at with a U.S. debt clock. Will give you an example of that. There is a range projected in the next 4 years. We will be at between 32 trillion and $50 trillion in debt. That is a huge range. That is a massive amount of debt, especially when you consider that the world has approximately $150 trillion or actual money. All the money in the world put together is somewhere in the realm of $150 trillion. And we're looking at somewhere between 30 and $50 trillion in debt by the time we get to 2025. If you are elected to office, how do you look to address that? Would you vote for, as an example, the current infrastructure bill that is being proposed by Joe Biden and the Democratic Party? Is there something you would try and convince of your colleagues, if elected, to try and change that outcome I've just detailed?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I think we can do, and this is a drop in the bucket, and this isn't, I'm not the person who came up with this. I've heard this, for several years. First thing I would do is 1 cent on the dollar across the board for non-mandatory spending. So we take 1 cent out for every dollar. We don't cut any programs. We just reduce their budgets. And that would save us $15 billion on the deficit right off the top. Now every time I say that, somebody says, well, that's nothing. We've got $1 trillion deficit. I mean, this year it's going to be $3 trillion or whatever the deficit is by the time we're done. So that's the first thing. And then I would want to create an audit of all the different departments, including the Pentagon and the military, to see where are we wasting money? Who's getting a new desk every year? I used to work for a big box retailer, and if you go to any desk in the store, there would be all these store used cleaning supplies when they paid for cleaning supplies already in the back, things like that. It's that type of administrative waste that we're spending each year. So we can then know, okay, you're wasting X amount of dollars. Now we're going to cut your budget by that much. And then I would just call to the carpet all the needless programs. One of the big things is foreign aid. I'm not completely against foreign aid. I think a lot of it is beneficial. I mean, if you want to call the shots in the world, like we do, you have to participate. But I think we can reduce the foreign aid bill by 40% right off the top. And I think a lot of the things that we do, we can, there was a gender studies. We were going to spend $9 million on gender studies, I believe, in Afghanistan.
Pakistan. $10 million in Pakistan in December of 2020. Right. Yes.
So thank you. So now tell me that somewhere here in America, maybe that's very important and we need to do it for the people of Pakistan. Maybe it is. Forgetting the merits. Are you telling me that there is not an American or a group of Americans we could have given $500,000 to and say, please go conduct this study for us, that we needed to send $10 million for it to, to be used for who knows what, for us to not find out the value of those studies? Because you and I know that's exactly what's going to happen. So we can call to the carpet things like that, wasteful things, or is there another way for us to utilize less money and get the same results? But calling the carpet, wasteful money that's going to the districts. Pork barrel spending. I'm not against that. That's how we get things done. That's how, if your congressman is doing right by you, money is coming back to your district. That's that pork barrel spending. But we can also call to the carpet, when somebody is taking advantage and taking taxpayer dollars from one district for a fun little pet project in their district. And I give a lot of grief to the different representatives for going on cable news. They won't come on your show. They won't go on local radio or TV, but you'll see them all the time smiling on Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity. But there would be a benefit to going on those shows and letting people know, hey, Congressman Smith is trying to get an extra $2 billion to his district so he can have a nice little gateway project with a plaque with his name on it that he brought the money. So these are some of the things I would do to try to get the debt and deficit down. And it's a long battle. You're not gonna walk in and show up and the very first year have a surplus. I think that's wishful thinking. We have, you asked about the infrastructure. Would I vote with it? Yes, I would. A reduced, I don't think the $2 trillion that Biden was looking for, the Democratic Party, I don't think that's realistic. I think we have to focus on the essentials, on the necessities. We have to get the bridges and the roads. Broadband, I think, is part of our infrastructure. There's a lot of rural areas that need it. I would vote for something like that. I mean, it's like I said, it's not going to be an overnight thing where we shut all spending down. That's just not an option. But yeah, those are some of the things I would do.
Okay. Thank you for that. I take notes as we go because I do pay attention to what everyone says when I do interviews with them.
Perfect.
I do want to, one of the things I would mention is if you get elected, one of my pet peeves and a lot of people's pet peeve is the $300 million that the United States gave as aid to the country of Jordan, a oil-rich nation, for them to run their government, even though they're not in debt. And again, it's an oil-rich nation. I think that was somewhat wasteful spending. It doesn't make sense to me. So I love anyone of any party to stop that.
Yeah, foreign aid is a huge thing.
Yeah, it gets crazy. Some of the things, I mean, $300 million to run a government that is already running, I don't understand. But let me also mention, you mentioned Claudia Tenney showing up on the show, Anthony Brindisi showing up on the show. As a point of fact, Claudia Tenney has been on this program in the past. She has not been since she's been reelected since 2021. Anthony Brindisi actively promised to be on this show for his entire term in Congress, and he refused to actually show up. So in the past, Claudia Tenney has been here, but she has not been here recently. Anthony Brindisi absolutely refused, even though he made a promise to do so, just to give people complete context.
Yeah, I have a thought on that.
Sure.
One, to be fair to Claudia Tenney, she hasn't been on Binghamton on radio stations or TV in Binghamton that I've seen. And a part of it is to be a little fair to her, even though it is still her district right now, I think she sees the writing on the wall, like the rest of us, that Binghamton will not be hers in the very near future, and she has to prepare for that. But we are in her district in the meantime. I would say, I don't know your feelings on Brindisi not coming on your show, whether you think he's scared or whatever. But I would say that it's not a matter of him being scared. It's a matter of him looking at your show and minimalizing it. Who are you? What is your audience? Why do I need to bother? And I think that's quite sad, because look, maybe you're not going to have an audience the size of Rachel Maddow, even though hers isn't overly large, but that doesn't mean you don't have people that listen to you, people that are his constituents, that that he represents, or in the future that I represent, and they have concerns that are just as real as anybody else's. And I think that's quite unfortunate. Now, I'm not saying you've got to go on every single little podcast that's out there, because there's a lot. But if you got somebody like yourself, and I'm not trying to kiss your butt or anything like that, but somebody who clearly puts in a lot of effort into a show, has a scheduled time, is always on it, has a dedicated audience, I think you owe it to those people to come on and at least once, just to let those people know that they matter.
I agree with you, and I think anyone, and I said this to Elise Bolt, and I will say it to you. I have much more confidence in your running than, say, Anthony Brindisi, who reneged on a promise, and you are actually showing up, taking the questions. They are tough questions. They are serious questions, because this is a serious election. And I think it's to the benefit of the public for you to have the opportunity to answer it, just as we would have given him. And he chose not to do that. Ms. Bolt did. And we always commend that of anyone who shows up on this program, no matter what party affiliation or political beliefs. But let me move forward.
Sure.
Let me ask this. And there's a few questions here. Let me ask something about your Twitter account that I saw. And I had a question about this, because on your Twitter account, it states that you mentioned in the description that you were the 2006 Person of the Year.
That's right.
Now, there's a problem with that, or perhaps there's a problem with that, in that in 2006, many people may not remember or may not be aware, everyone in the world was the Person of the Year. And people seeing this document, and I've had conversation with individuals who have seen your Twitter page, have seen that, and found it to be very beneficial, a positive to you, but did not realize this was something for everyone. Is that misleading? How would you answer someone who would say that?
Yeah, so I can see that if somebody looks at that and never bothers to verify it, it would be disingenuous and misleading. I would like to hope, I guess maybe I'm hoping too much, that if somebody saw someone claiming to be Person of the Year, that they would look it up. And when they look it up, they would see, oh, so was I. And a lot of people, I assume, actually don't even know that in 2006, you were Time Person of the Year. So it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. It's not meant to blow myself up and to, I don't think I do. I don't have a plaque in here that says Time Person of the Year. It's more as a tongue-in-cheek. And again, I would hope that people would take a look and see, when you see that, who is this guy? I've never heard of him, and he was Time Person of the Year. And then they would look and they would get the joke.
Well, knowing elections as well as I do for the last 15 years, someone was going to point that out. I wanted to give you an opportunity to have a full answer on it with all context involved. because I don't necessarily like attack ads. So I wanted to give you that opportunity to answer that. Let's deal with something a little more serious. Right now, critical race theory is a major issue in the United States. In fact, it's affecting France, where it's being rejected. It's affecting England and Australia, where they are also rejecting it. But in the United States, it is a stronghold. It is involved in our school systems. I can tell you that it is something that's being implemented into our colleges for the September of 2021. It is something that is being planned to be put into our high schools in September of 2021 and possibly beyond. With that being said, do you support BLM, the organization, and or the term? Do you support critical race theory?
All right, so let's just take, I think BLM will be a lot easier
Probably
to handle. Do I support the organization? Not really. And I say not really, and I'm not a big supporter of any organization within a movement, typically. There's some exceptions. The V Foundation for Cancer Research, I'm a huge fan of theirs. But as far as political movements, I guess is what I'm talking about. I'm not a big supporter, because typically, this isn't across the board, but usually the person at the top has their own little personal piggy bank. This isn't about the movement. Maybe initially it was, but money can corrupt people. And I think that's what typically happens. And I think you see that with Black Lives Matter, with the organization. So do I support them? Not really. I don't actively not support them. I don't know the full details, but it looks like she's doing quite well. She being the head of BLM.
Patrice Cullors.
Yeah, doing quite well for herself. Yeah. I don't know where the money came from, but I can take a guess, right? I think you can too. And so here's somebody there's people in good faith giving money, and it's not going towards the cause. And we see that, and this isn't just to pick on BLM. I mean, look at the NRA. They're the same way. You see Wayne LaPierre, yes. Taking that money. You see mega church pastors who, they're there to preach the gospel in 1 second and then fly off in the private jet with their mistress in the next. So, and as far as the movement, I think there's something to that. I think as far as, do I support Black lives? Do I think Black lives matter? Yes, Black lives matter. I mean, I think I can say that without having to say, yeah, but all lives matter. I think it should be easy for somebody to say Black lives matter. It should be easy to say anybody's life matters. But if somebody says, do you think Black lives matter? The answer should just be yes. The end. You don't have to get into a dissertation about that. And I think, when you look at, and this is kind of going to take us right into critical race theory.
Okay.
If you look at the history of the United States, there is no denying. It would take some serious linguistic gymnastics to try to deny the racist history, the holding down of Black people throughout America's history. It's just there. And the question would remain, at what point were African Americans no longer suppressed? And at what point, when can you say this is the moment when there are no longer, is there a ripple effect, and no longer are they being suppressed? That would be that would be a question that I think would take a deep dive, and I don't know that we're there, that the ripple effects are no longer gone. And we live in a country, we live with people who have done hard labor for sitting at the wrong spot in a diner, for trying to own. Those people still live with us. That's how recent this was. So it's not like this is a long ago, your great grandfather, stories you heard about and only pictures in a book. There's people alive that can tell us exactly what it was like to be a second-class citizen. With that, and if that didn't quite answer your question, you can let me know. But with critical race theory, so this obviously has just blown up, and it's all over right-wing media. I didn't know what it was, so I had to look it up. I had to look up what is critical race theory.
Well, to be fair, it's also called intersectionality or gender identity politics. They would all be the same thing.
Well, as far as critical race theory, I looked it up. It's been around since the 70s. And what critical race theory actually is, if you look it up, I have no problem with it being taught in a law school, in college, or in maybe a sociology class, whatever the case is, or if it's an elective class at the college level. No problem with that. I think it's completely fine. And if anybody right now is saying, oh no, it's a race, look up what critical race theory actually is. And I just imagine somewhere out there, somebody teaching it, finding out that all of a sudden everyone thinks they're teaching white people are bad. You know, they're holding every white person is the devil and all these types of things. And what critical race theory actually is, I don't think should be taught in schools. I don't think you should teach that type of nuance. I mean, just to give you an example of what critical race theory is, it's how the law, applies differently to certain minorities versus white people. Essentially, this is the very Cliff Notes versions. A good example of that would be, which is no longer a law, but the higher punishments for crack cocaine versus the punishments for powder cocaine. There was greater punishment. So that's kind of what you would study. Why does that exist? Now, what the layman's idea of what critical race theory is, if you're talking about that, where they're teaching kids that America is just inherently racist, that all white people are bad, all cops are bad, anything like that. No, that's stupid. If anybody is teaching that, if you can show me any school that is actually teaching that and not just using words like equity or something where you're kind of playing with it, but they're actually teaching those things, 100% I'm against it. I'll be at that school with you to yell them down. But I don't think it's actually happening. There was recently here in Binghamton a controversy with a book.
School board. Yes, I was about to bring that up.
There you go. Okay, great. Stupid. Listen, I'm not saying that the book is wrong or that the lady should have never.
Let me mention for those who are watching and are not familiar with this, because it is a regional thing. Recently in March, there was a book reading by Zoom for students who were away at home. These were for 8-year-old children. I think that's 5th grade. And there was a book that was read. The selection in that book dealt with aspects of critical race theory. It also dealt with the police and was seen as a negative light on police officers. That brought a large amount of attention in April to the school board and the school board election, and the schools, the Binghamton City School District did apologize for that book having been read to the children as being inappropriate. So I just wanted to give people context on that, but go ahead with your answer, please.
Yeah, the book was called Something Happened in My Town or in My City. Yeah. And there was a part where there's a African-American family and they're talking about a shooting, and in their conversation, the book isn't saying, the narrator isn't saying that all cops are racist. It's this family is having this conversation. But here's my thing about that. Why are we going into that type of nuance with children? That doesn't, if a family wants to have that conversation with their kids, that's one thing. But I don't think, maybe I'm not giving children enough credit, but I don't think that they're prepared to understand the nuance. Heck, you and I have a hard enough time discussing it. It's to expect that children should somehow be able to digest that, understand what the book really meant, stop and give it some thought, and try to understand what is the police African-American experience in the United States, all the while thinking about recess. And they're supposed to merge all that together. I think that's
5 years low.
Yeah, I mean, I've got strong words, but I think it's ridiculous is the best one I can give you, without going too far. I think things like that, I think, are ridiculous. I don't think we need to be teaching children those types of things. Now, look, we live in America, and like I said earlier, there's no way to sugarcoat America's dark side of their history. It exists, and we should be teaching that. But I have quite a different thought, I think, than some people, where I don't think we should hide it. I think we should almost, and don't take this the wrong way, but as a country, wear it as a badge of shame and honor. That the one that we had these atrocities happen, but we've overcome them. We've done the work. There has been someone that has come along and said, no, this isn't right. And people listen, and we make change. Even in the face of resistance, that change has been made in America. And it's a continuing process that we always try to do better. And somebody that will come along and say, this isn't right, and people will listen. And there will be resistance, and we'll come to a conclusion. And maybe it is, no, everything is fine. Or maybe the answer is, which has happened time and time again, we do need to make a change. And a change is made. And unfortunately, it takes time. I think it's wrong. I think when you look back in the 1960s and you hear Lyndon Johnson, saying not now, needs Congress support. And yeah, well, why? Why do people need your permission to live free? That was ridiculous, but it's how it was. And I stand by that. It should be a badge of shame for our country, but also a badge of honor that we got past it, because there's a lot of countries out there that haven't gotten past their dark history, that they're still living in it. And here we are every day making better examples. And I think we should teach kids the dark side. I don't think we, as it gets age appropriate, but history is history, and then teach them and show them this is why it's gotten better. This is how it's gotten better, and we're still working on it.
Well, I want to thank you for answering that question. I know it's a difficult question. I did ask it of Elise Bolt. If I speak with Claudia Tenney, and I would like to, and we are reaching out to her, I will ask her as well as any other candidate for either the New York 22nd or the New York 19th. It is a difficult question, and the public should hear your complete answer on that in context. So I thank you for it, because people should know. And I know it's a tough question. It's a tough one to answer.
Yeah, I think, but quite honestly, I think the critical race theory argument that is going around now is a political talking point.
Absolutely.
I think it's being amped up, and we're not having an honest conversation. We're just, going around now. You're hearing the word equity is a bad word. And if you see it, then that means critical race theory. And it's causing all this strife. You're getting people who unfortunately are passionate, and they want to get involved. So they go down to a school board. They don't verify anything is happening, and they're yelling at the school board members. And, the school board's like, well, we're not teaching this. I don't, so I think you're going to hear a lot of critical race theory going into 2022. And I think it's here to stay, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's going to be around.
Well, I agree with you, which is why I wanted to ask the question about it, because I think it's important for people to know. Switching gears completely, though, let's look at, there's another major issue, which as a veteran, you may be familiar with, and I know is very important for people in the New York State, as well as the nation. Gun control, firearms, the Second Amendment. Essentially, these have always been, and this is one of the oldest arguments in the United States ever. Currently, the Biden administration is continuing a path of asking for restrictions on ownership and redefining the Second Amendment. Recently, just last week, I believe it was Thursday, Joe Biden came out with a proposal and stated that he actually misstated the Second Amendment and what you can do with it. It received 4 Pinocchios from the New York Times. It's that badly misstated what he said. So the question we have here facing the New York 22nd District, and for every member who would represent the people here, do you support the Second Amendment? Do you support red flag laws, which is one of the preeminent solutions that is currently being presented by opponents of the Second Amendment? And is there a better option than the choices we've received so far?
Yeah. So number one, in simplest terms, yes, I support the Second Amendment. I know that, and we've talked about this before,
Yes.
when we discussed whether or not there could be any type of restrictions. And I tell people the word regulated is right there. It says shall not be infringed. The gun side loves to mention that, but the word regulated appears right there, right in the beginning in this very same sentence. Um, I think gun ownership, I think is protected one by the second. I also think it's in a way protected by the ninth, because there is no, you don't see in the Second Amendment people can own a gun like that. It's not that plainly written, and I think it's protected in the ninth. Where just because it's not said doesn't mean
10th.
we don't
I
have.
think you're thinking of the 10th.
That's the 10th.
Any rules and laws not previously delegated reside with the people in the states, not the government. I'm paraphrasing it there. I believe that's the 10th.
That's the 10th for the states, but individuals, I think, is the ninth.
I thought the 10th was both, but I could be wrong.
You got me second guessing now. Yeah, but
while we speak, I will double check that. But I just want to make sure if people are looking it up and they're watching us, I want to make sure they're looking up the right.
Because someone's yelling at their screen right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but to answer your question, I think yes. I think people have a right to protect themselves, and they have a right to decide how to protect themselves. And what I mean by that is, as far as what gun you own, I believe you're a former Marine, correct?
That is correct.
Right. I'm sure a couple guys in your house and you were armed with a 9mm Beretta, you would be able to fend them off.
Mm-hmm.
A 70-year-old woman with a 9mm Beretta might have a problem. And for those who don't know the weapon, it can create a clean wound, and someone can keep coming if you hit them with it. So maybe it's not going to work out for them. They might need a shotgun to feel safe. And my point being is that when it comes time to restrict certain weapons, I'm not in that class completely. So what's the most dangerous weapon right now? AR-15, right? When I say the most dangerous weapon, what I mean by that is, in the eyes of the anti-gun crowd, what is
they would say
enemy number one?
They would
correct.
Say yes. Which is absolutely not correct based on FBI, Crime in the USA data for the last 30 years.
Yeah, well, perception sometimes can become reality in politics.
Understood.
But it's enemy number one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it disappeared just like that. They didn't take them away. It just never existed. Mm-hmm. There's no more AR-15s. Well, what do you think the anti-gun crowd does? Do they just go home and say, well, there is no dangerous weapon, or does something else become enemy number one? Right? There will be a new most dangerous gun. There will always be a most dangerous gun that they have to regulate, restrict, take away. And so my point being is, when I say I'm not really down with saying this type of gun is illegal. What I mean by that is, if they wanted to restrict AR-15 ownership, they want to say, look, no more AR-15 sales. We're taking it off the shelf. It's going into the fully automatic weapon category now. Can't own it. I'd be fine with that, with certain restrictions. Number one, you're going to give me something for it. And what I mean by that is, there's going to be a language written into the bill that prevents you from restricting another gun in the future. And if you do, then it's going to void all other gun laws. So there's going to be some protection in there, because remember, today it's the AR-15. Once they win that battle, they're going on to the next one. And the proof is, they did it with automatic weapons. They got those, then something else became the most dangerous. So I'm not completely against restricting guns. Look, gun laws, people will tell you they don't work, but I would ask you, when was the last time a mass shooting happened with a fully automatic weapon?
There's only been 4 in the last 70 years in the United States, 2 of them by police officers, 2 by criminals. The last one was, I believe, if I remember correctly, 1971.
Yeah, I think the last crime was LA, the bank robbery, where the 2 guys with the full body armor.
Those weren't automatic. Those were modified weapons, so they weren't considered
Right.
automatic. But yes, that's correct. Mhm.
So gun laws do work. They do have an effect.
Mhm.
So I would be okay with restricting, but again, you're going to give me something. I'm not. I think too often we have politicians that are like, I'm going to protect the Second Amendment. I'm going to protect it, and yet slowly but surely, new laws are constantly being passed. It's just chiseling away and chiseling away. Well, why don't we sit down and say, tell us the anti-gun, tell us what you want, and here's what you're going to protect to get it. There's going to be language to say you have to keep your hands off going forward.
Mhm.
But you asked about red flag laws.
Before you mention that,
Yep.
I do want to stand. The correction and the correct answer is we are both right in terms of the 9th and 10th Amendments. The 9th Amendment stating the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, which means anything not stated would remain a right of the people. The 10th Amendment is the powers not regulated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So essentially, it's doubling down on saying the same thing twice, one
Sure.
more focus on the states, but in both cases saying these are every law not put down is a right of the people.
Correct.
So we
Yeah.
were both correct, and I just want to make sure we got that clarification. Mhm.
But
red flags.
yeah, so red flag laws. Look, I think in the simplest terms, I think we should have background checks. We should know who we're giving gun to. I mean, we talk all the time. We hear anytime there's a mass shooting, you hear ban the AR-15. No, it's mental health, and then we do nothing about either, which is weird to me because I understand one is protected by a right, so that takes a little effort. But I think we're all on board with mental health, and I think there's no foolproof method, but I think we can have some background checks to keep the guns out of the hands of people that we don't want to have them. Now, we can't let it be arbitrary. It's got to be specific. It's got to be well stated on what constitutes somebody not being allowed to own a gun. And that would go a step further to concealed gun ownership. I don't think it should be up to a sheriff somewhere after somebody fills out the applications, they meet all the requirements, to just say, well, I don't want to give you one just for some arbitrary reason. I just don't feel like it today, or maybe they just have it out for this person because they know it from town, whatever the case is. But in all cases, I think if we're going to have background checks, which I think we should in all gun sales, they have to be very clear about what it is we are looking for and what would stop you from buying a gun. And if those things aren't flagged, that's it. The gun is sold.
Okay. We've been speaking almost to an hour, and I want to thank you again for taking the time to speak with us and to enlighten the public about this very important race, which will have a significant impact on everyone in the nation, not just the New York 22 or the New York 19. I do, and it's up to you how much time we have, because I know you mentioned on your website, and I will have that included in the link in the final video presented to the public. You speak about student loans and student loan debt. I know that you speak about immigration and illegal immigration, legal immigration and illegal immigration, and a path to citizenship, which are also big subjects. And people will be able to go to your website, which is Hal for Congress.
Hal Stewart.
Hal Stewart, excuse me, I stand corrected. Hal Stewart for Congress, and they will be able to see it there more fully, and we will always invite you back to the program to speak more. But if this is going to be my last question, it's up to you. One of the things I think is growing as an important issue that we will see more and more debated and discussed going towards 2022 is the Iran nuclear deal in the Middle East and Middle East stability specifically. And I know that right now the Biden administration is looking to reinstate the Iran nuclear deal, and that would involve releasing sanctions against Iran, which would allow them to have funding that back in January of 2016, John Kerry stated would allow Iran to create more global terror. We just had this weekend a continuing escalation of violence where the United States dropped drone attacks against Iranian-backed militants who attacked United States citizens, troops in Iraq and in Syria. This is not ending here. So let me ask you, in reference, because this will be an important issue for Congress, if not before 2022, definitely in 2022 and beyond, do you support the Iran nuclear deal? What do you believe would be the best path to start investigating to increase stability and peace in the Middle East? If you can answer that. It's a tough question, I know.
Yeah, it's a near impossible question. As far as the Iran nuclear deal, that's an easy one. Yeah, I support us. Look, the world is halfway in with this deal already. I think I don't think it wasn't not working, and it gave us access to Iran's facilities. Now the question is, well, how can we trust Iran? Well, if we can't trust them, then it doesn't matter that we're in the deal or not in the deal. If they wanted to have a nuclear weapon, if you consider, this is kind of getting a little wonky, but when the Soviet Union fell apart, so did a superpower level knowledge of nuclear weapons, of military, and so on. So to find a nuclear scientist was not a tough task. And so we're still seeing the ripple effects of that today when you look at North Korea and so on. So if Iran wanted a nuke, I believe that they could have one if they really wanted one. But I think the Iran deal gives us some sort of leeway into or control into their nuclear program, gives us access to their facilities, and helps open up Iran to the world. And I think that Middle East peace, if I told you I had the answers,
I wouldn't believe you.
Yeah, I mean,
because no one does. No one does.
No one does. We had the Abraham Accords recently, which I don't, I know, I'm sure you've said this line 1,000 times, but Orange Man bad. I make it no secret that I am no fan of Trump, and I do not think he was a good president. I don't make that a secret, but that doesn't mean everything was bad. And I think the Space Force was a great idea. Just as an example, but the Abraham Accords, credit where credit is due, it wasn't that big of a deal. We're talking about very small players normalizing relations with Israel, not true peace deals, but agreeing to start normalizing relations. But at least it was a step. But I think the only way to get to peace is to somehow to get countries caught up with the rest of the world. And if all we do is bomb them whenever we perceive a threat, well, go back to our history and imagine that there's modern weapons. And every time we had George Washington step up, Britain just bombs his house. And then Thomas Jefferson steps up he's going to take the lead. And then he gets bombed or killed, or they put sanctions on us. I think at some point, there's human beings there. So we have to have some level of compassion and some willingness to protect the innocent. But I think too, we have to kind of step back and let things happen, let things develop, instead of every time somebody is getting some leeway because we don't like them, we just go in and we crush everything and then wonder why they hate us so much. And I'll tell you this, Congress needs to get its war powers back from the president of the United States. Why the president just has free reign to wage war and just call it strategic strikes is beyond me.
Well, actually, there's a lot of Democrats who agree with you this weekend on that very same point. Tim Kaine, Sarah Jacobs out of California, a few others. So a lot of people are concerned about that. Like I said, this is a topical and growing issue for Congress. It's not just a presidential
Yeah,
commentary.
I think we cause a lot of the strife in the Middle East with our constant involvement and constant attacks. And I mean, people wonder, why does the Middle East hate us so much? Well, geez, we bombed the heck out of the area, and then one country, we just fund them to death, and they must look at them like, what did we do? Why are we the bad guys? And it's one thing for the people at the top, the actual bad guys, but you have to understand the kids living in Syria, the people living in Syria without the benefit of cable TV, all they know is the Americans did this. That's all they know. So I think a big chunk of our ability to bring peace is going to be to lessen our military involvement.
Okay. As I mentioned, and a lot of people don't realize, there are so many issues involved with Congress on so many levels that affect all of our lives. We've just gone through the Second Amendment. We've talked about the income, the economy, the national debt. We're talking, and we are just barely touching on these things. We're talking about international policy, and we haven't even gone to Russia, China, the rest of the world. It's a big deal. And I hope that in the coming weeks and months, as the election comes closer, not only will we be back on this program, but that our colleagues in the news media take our lead to ask about these significant factors that I know, when we speak to the public, and I've spoken to you in the past, are issues people want to talk about and they want answers on. But as always, now we can always continue, and we've been on for an hour, so it's a little bit longer than we had initially expected. I want to first give you an opportunity. Is there anything that stands out to you that we have not touched on, a subject that we really should speak about right now, and let people know about so that they can hear your words on this?
I don't think there's a subject, specific. I mean, there's so much, as you said, that I want to talk about. And some of the things we touched on, I think we barely scratched the surface.
Sure.
But I told my wife this would be a half hour.
I know.
So,
and again, I thank you for the extra time, and I beg her forgiveness for keeping you on longer, but it's been a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, I would like to say, if I can, just generally speaking, I hope one of the, I talked about, that I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I don't buy into these hyper partisan politics, and I believe most people do too. I think one thing I promised when I talk to people is that I'll always make myself available. I can't say that I'm going to respond to you right away, but if you ask me a question in good faith, I'll answer it. And when I say you, I mean you as Michael, but also anybody on Twitter or anybody on Facebook. You can see my conversations. I engage with people whether we agree or disagree, and that's important for a couple reasons. Number one, I let out the secret earlier today on another interview, but I'll tell you now, I don't have all the answers. I'm wrong. In a lot of cases, what I think is not the right way to go about things. And I can say that because I'm a human being, but you might have a right way. You might have a better way, or maybe you have a way that I could tweak what I think a little bit and come up with a better idea. And the only way that is possible is if we have conversations in good faith. We actually have conversations without reducing it to name calling, personal attacks, just calling someone stupid or blowing up and then blocking them, whatever the case is. So I would ask during my campaign, look, not everybody's going to want to vote for me. I get that. I mean, as things stand right now, I'm as worrisome as a cloudy day to the major candidates. I've got a long road ahead of me, but that's okay. But hopefully we can still talk and come to some resolution or some understanding, and maybe come away a little wiser for it. And yeah, that's it. That's what I hope for. But if anybody wants to reach out to me, they absolutely can, and I will 100% respond to them.
And just again, it's the Hal Stewart for Congress, which is your campaign website itself. There is your email, your
So I got Facebook, Hal Stewart for Congress, on Facebook. HalStewartForCongress.com is my website. And then Hal Stewart for New York 22 is how you can find me on Twitter. And you can email me, Hal Stewart for Congress at gmail.com. Email me if you'd like to go that route.
Absolutely. And we will make sure that we will include that in the video so people will be able to see it very clearly. With that said, because I don't want your wife headhunting me and tracking me down, I want to say, Hal Stewart, it has been a pleasure to speak with you. I'm happy to have heard why you're running and the issues that matter to you and your deep thought on the many issues that are affected by Congress. I hope everyone does take the opportunity to hear this video, to see who you are, and to follow up if they have interest. Folks, this is No Sound Bites Allowed. This is what we do as an expression of the First Amendment. We speak to the candidates, we speak to the elected officials of every party, of every political view, to find out, well, their answers to the questions that matter to you. And we hope that you will join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our live stream at 2:30 p.m., where we speak to you and everyone in the world to hear what you have to say about the issues that matter. But until the next time, we want to thank you. We appreciate you being here. We thank our guest, Hal Stewart, and we want you to be well. Thank you.
Thank you.